So politics has always been within my spirit. It's all that I can really reflect on. I'm actually named after Jamaican public servants. So my full name is Michael Alexander Blake, Michael being Michael Manley, and Alexander being Alexander Bustamante in Jamaica. And so, even from the beginning, it kind of was teed up for me. When I was in church, my youth group, I was the youth president for 4 straight years. I was the senior class president in high school. I was in student government at college. It has always been a part of who I am. My fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, I was one of the assistant vice presidents of the Midwest. And so I have always felt, and I still do feel, that there is not a more comprehensive way to help people than through politics and public service. There is nothing that is going to happen in your life, public sector, municipal, federal, national, international, congressional, wherever you may be, that's not formed by some part of policy. And so I wanted to be a part of that. And so when I was able to be in Chicago, I graduated from Northwestern University. I was studying journalism. I was interning for a state senator while still having a full-time job. Interning for State Senator Jeff Schoenberg, a great man, a great public servant who really cared about the community. And a woman walked in, she said, "If you don't help me, I'm gonna lose my home in a week." And that was that turning point for me, because I reflected on how my mom would tell us stories about how she was briefly homeless in Jamaica. And I would think about how growing up in the Bronx, New York, that we had to sell dinners on Saturdays to pay for our rent. You realize that this is real. And it's not some theoretical conversation. If you don't help her, she may not have a home. And we were able to keep her home. And she came back and said, "Thank you." And that was the next turning point for me. That was that moment of, I need to give back. And I need to be involved in an impactful way. And so all those steps, from journalism to prepare me to be better at communicating a message, to the internship to be able to see firsthand what happens through constituent services, to people that gave me a chance. It opened up an opportunity for me to be that young man from the Bronx that was able to pursue his dreams. And to me, being in politics and being able to serve and being able to train people and being able to empower people, and most importantly, just being able to help somebody, that's how I feel gives me true fulfillment. That's why I think I'm here. It is an incredible honor to be a fellow in the Institute of Politics. Anything that is connected to the name of Kennedy makes you reflect in a greater way of your responsibility to serve. When you think about what JFK stood for, when you think about all that his family continues to stand for, how you have Caroline now as an ambassador, it reminds you of service. And so to be one of 6 people to be chosen from around the country to be here, to be able to teach students what I've learned over the years, and realizing that what's the point of learning all this and having this experience if you're not going to help people, it is a remarkable opportunity. And I also don't take lightly being the only person of color in this program right now, and that responsibility of being able to say to communities, whether if you're a person of color or not, that we are here, we're engaged, we're leaders, we're part of the process. It gives someone inspiration that they can be a part of the process. That if I can grow up in the Bronx, New York and make it, it doesn't matter where you grew up, you can make it also. I don't take lightly that I'm a sitting elected official. And so when we're talking about politics, it's not just about something you may read in a book. You can see someone firsthand who is pursuing his dream of being in office. And what are the steps? How do you run for office? How do you fundraise? How do you knock on doors? How do you contact voters? How do you do messaging? How did you get to where you're at? And to realize that you can realize that dream in an impactful way. And I also recognize that I want to be able to share with to everyone here, especially to the undergrads, of course, my experiences in working for the first black president, in their experiences of being around President Obama on all aspects, from the times of the Iowa caucus, when people were wondering if we would be successful and would win, to the times of being a part of the inauguration, and being with the King family, going up to the Capitol, and that emotional feeling of them coming back and saying thank you, to the moments of being in the West Wing where we're leading a meeting with attorneys general around the country around financial regulatory reform, and then that same night you're leading a meeting with Jay-Z and Beyonce to talk about music, in which I did go to the concert that night. You know, you got to make it all, you know, part of that responsibility there. You know, you can share those moments, you know, and for someone that can seem so distant, for so many students and so many people in the community, that they can be around someone and say, well, just tell us about the experience and make it practical for us. What does it mean to work at a White House? What does it mean to be in office? What does it mean to be a fellow who's a person of color at this time in 2016, when you have so much that is happening in our country between communities and the police and the conversation around criminal justice? You know, my hope is that when this semester is done, that anyone that came across us, whether it be in the study group, in office hours, or in this casual conversation, that they get a true and practical and hopefully inspirational sense of what is it like to be an elected official of color at this time, to talk about the necessity of race and gender in this Obama era. We have to recognize that politics is fluid and public service is fluid. And when you're in an era where you have a Trump versus Clinton dynamic, when you're in an era where you're in a state that, you know, in many ways, presidential elections, it goes to the Democrat. That's pretty much presumed, but obviously, as we've seen, whether it be for governor or Senate, it can go either way. To be here at this moment of time, it is our responsibility to make it real, make it impactful, make it special. You know? And I really hope that my gratitude is displayed by working as hard as I can for the students here at Harvard, for them to see that the Institute of Politics is truly a living memorial to the Kennedys. I think safety is about perception. Right? I think every person that's trying to assess how they feel is not worried about the statistic per se. But I think, you know, we are creating a dynamic in our district, in our assembly district, so that people can feel safe, and that the conditions of success and the environment of success are there for everyone. You know, and equally that we can be very practical about it, that I can say to them that I'm a sitting elected official who I experienced an incident with the officers and had to go through the challenges of excessive force and wondering what could happen in a split second. But in that same manner, you know, if we make sure people have good jobs and good schools and healthy communities and homes they can live in, that creates the environment where then people are investing in that environment. And so, you know, our vision for my assembly district, the 79th district in the South Bronx, is 3-2-1. The 3 E's, of economic development, education, equality for all. The 2 paths of how to have stronger minority and women-owned business enterprises so that we can hire and train people from our community. Having a career-oriented education system so someone can go from the cradle to the career. And then the one goal of how do you transform the South Bronx to the urban metropolis of the world. That I want people to be able to see our community and see the opportunities. See that we were able to partner up with Tata Consulting Services and the Tata Group to bring 10,000 free books to our students. See how we're able to partner up with the Libra Group to bring more than $500,000 over the next 10 years for Bronx entrepreneurs. See how we're able to partner up also with the Libra Group and Workshop and Business Opportunities to provide entrepreneurs scholarships so they can train themselves and get training and be able to grow with access to capital, contracting in that way. See the pieces that we've been able to put in place, and also be able to see how we can create a safer environment. So we're engaging with Life Camp and having a Pledge for Peace assemblies at our schools, 3 of which that we did. We're working with Save Our Streets, and so that our communities can feel invested. When you do all these things, then the everyday person in the community and on the block feels, you know what, I'm going to invest in this, and I'm going to care about this. And equally, being sensitive to dynamics, that crime happens everywhere. Crime's not just happening in black and brown communities, but we sometimes allow the narrative to exist as if that's the case. You know, the reality is we have to create the conditions so that folks can feel safe and they can feel empowered. And I believe that we're doing that in our district. And I think the fact of someone who grew up there, born and raised in the Bronx, knows the area, understands the dynamic, I'm able to have conversation to say, look, I understand what you're experiencing. I feel you, I hear you, I see you. So let's do what we can so that folks don't just feel safe, but they feel inspired, and they feel like, you know what, I'm going to care about this community. If you find a way to direct the energy of a young person so that they're not standing on the corner, but actually give them opportunity. That same young brother, young sister that's standing on the corner that could be a part of a bad deal going wrong, if you give them opportunity, you direct them to jobs, you direct them to training, you actually give them a reason to be engaged, they'll take that exact same talent and utilize it for good. And then you're not worried about crime, you're focusing on career. And so for me, it's about what can I do to make sure everything is happening as best as I possibly can, so that we're looking at the best of the Bronx rather than the worst that people may be perceiving. Look, I think there's tension all over the country right now, and I don't know if any of us can say if we think it's happening with greater intensity. I think we're just seeing it more. You know, the fact that people have camera phones that can start recording something immediately, or put it on Facebook Live or Snapchat or Instagram, it changed the dynamic in that way. And the tension is multifold. Right? The tension is an understanding that 95% of the cops are doing the right thing, and they're doing good work, and they're helping keep communities safe. And if you need someone, you dial 911. And 95% of people that live in the community do the right thing. But people just want to see fairness on both sides. And if I or someone in the community does something wrong, then you obviously want for justice to happen, and you want justice to happen the exact same way if an officer does something wrong. That's a fair conversation. And when you see what's happening, where you're having continual evidence being displayed in video footage and through phones, camera phones, etc., of one story being told, but then the truth is coming out what actually did happen. How do you rationalize that someone can say, I can't breathe 11 times, and the only person that is going off to jail is the person who took the video? How do you rationalize that someone could be in Wisconsin with their hands on the wheel and getting shot in their side? How do you rationalize that you're trying to tell people that Keith Lamont Scott in North Carolina had a gun that was a threat, but then you watch the video and he's actually walking essentially backwards? That is the reason why people are so frustrated. And you have to recognize that. And you have to recognize that if someone is out in the community, whether it be for bootleg CDs or potentially selling loose cigarettes, which Garrett Gardner was not doing on that day, there's a deeper economic issue happening in that community. What is happening so that instead of having to do that, they actually had jobs and in schools in the first place? And so until we're real about that, until we're real that someone has to go to jail for doing crimes and doing actions and taking lives, that if anyone else was to do that would have the exact same action against them and consequence against them. And how are we then building? What are we doing to empower and have transformational change, at least to the prosecutors across this country? What are we doing for grand jury reform? What are we doing so we're focusing in New York and North Carolina on raise the age so 16 and 17-year-olds are not being tried as adults? What are we doing for training for these officers so there's not an implicit bias that may happen among some of them, so that they perceive and presume that a Black and Latino man is a potential threat, that they have fear for their life? What is the definition of excessive force? How is excessive force being utilized? All of these pieces what creates that tension. And until you start seeing changes happen, people are going to continue to think and wonder, what more has to happen? What more do you have to see to recognize that something has to change? I can't really fathom how someone can rationalize watching what's happening as it relates to Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Keith Lamont Scott, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, etc., 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 and try to act like something doesn't have to change. You shouldn't lose your life because of Skittles. You shouldn't be rewarded with overtime and desk duty that Daniel Pantaleo in New York received. You shouldn't be able to proceed and continue on as if life is the same. Because as a Black man, there's no way I can feel 100% comfortable given what's going on in these communities. When I had my incident where I was at a community event, and at that event, when you see something happening, you're going back over to try to figure out what's happening. And I have on a White House polo shirt, slacks and shoes. And I then am the victim of excessive force. Well, then what happens to that young brother or young sister that's going down the block that is not recognized, not known, and doesn't have someone to stand up for them? And tension could have escalated quickly. Fortunately, I was recognized, but my name and my title shouldn't be the justification for justice. And so if we recognize what's happening, if we make substantial changes around what's happening, if we get serious about what can occur to provide real change, then you can take the steps for tension to be reduced and opportunities to be increased. My goddaughter Rebecca is a brilliant young mind and is raised by amazing parents in Hosea and Rachel Cheeks Cavan. World of Money, ran by Sabrina Lamb, has been transformative of really showing these young people to think about investing and saving and planning early. I think too often we try to talk to kids like they're kids all of the time, rather than actually trying to prepare them along the way. And then we get surprised when things don't change and things happen. And so to be able to have that moment of, in the same legislative session, on one day to have your goddaughter there talking about World of Money, how to save money, engage in that way. And on another day to have my mom there, Hillary Lawrence, who's the matriarch of our family, anchor of our family, and the pride that she had to see her baby boy in the assembly. And on another day to have the Tuskegee Airmen there for our next to last day of session that we were able to bring up. It brings it all home, in a very real way, in a very exciting way. I've been blessed. I am blessed. Amazing family and friends that are around me. Amazing networks I've been able to be a part of. But it also doesn't hurt that your goddaughter's really smart, and really engaged in that way. Look, I have a nephew, Dwight, who is my heart. He's always like any young man, has a lot of energy, but he cares so much about drawing and art, and now the conversation about tattoos, which I don't know what to say sometimes about that, but you got to empower them, stop trying to make kids into what they're not, and let them follow their dreams, inspire them, push them, encourage them. We're blessed. We're all here at Harvard. I graduated from Northwestern. We're blessed. But for the kid that may go to that community college, that doesn't mean that they're not smart. The kid that's still figuring out their way doesn't mean they're not talented as well. So when you have those moments, whether someone is 8 or 18, inspire them. Make sure you enjoy these moments along the way. We have to recognize as a country, as a society, that we are a global economy. That by 2050, people of color will be the majority in this country. And we have to recognize that, we have to understand that. And that we are no longer in conversations, as John O'Brien always brilliantly says, that this is not just a civil rights conversation, it's a silver rights conversation. And that there's an economic necessity for diversity. That's the reason why, over these next few weeks, we're going to have Van Jones, who's going to be one of our guests, who his work through Dream Corps, Cut 50, and Green for All, and what are we doing through Yes We Code to provide opportunities for communities. Alejandra Castillo, who's the National Director of the Minority Business Development Agency, to talk through the impact of entrepreneurship and her work that she's been doing with Essence, Michelle Ebanks, and so many others. Julissa Ferreira, City Councilwoman from New York City, who's the chair of the Finance Committee, to talk through, again, the impact of what happens when we invest in these communities. When you invest in these companies, you can then allow for them to hire more people and invest in our communities in a more impactful way. We were able to change the law in New York, one of my signature pieces of legislation, bipartisan bill, we were able to get done, that effective in 2017, companies that are 200 employees or less will get paid, their contract with New York State will get paid in 15 days instead of 30 days. That's a game changer, because for these minority women-owned businesses where sometimes you have to wait for so long, if the company is waiting to get paid, then the employee is waiting to get paid. And when you have such little amount of net worth and disposable income in these communities, it has dramatic impact in being able to pay them earlier, being able to pay them consistently, and being able to help them to grow. And so, whether it be through that piece of legislation, the work I mentioned again with Libra Group, through workshop business opportunities to be able to provide these scholarships so these entities can grow their companies to larger scale, to the efforts we're focusing on trying to launch a Universal Hip Hop Museum in the Bronx and focus on technology and how that can be that entryway. The Conscious Venture Lab, and what are we doing to demonstrate that you can have healthy food and have, do good and do well at the same time through conscious capitalism in that manner. What are we doing to create a tech incubator and a tech accelerator in our district, in our community? When we had MSMEC come to the Bronx for the Growing Hope Special, where 17 tech companies were featured as part of that. All of this is creating the conditions for minority and women-owned businesses to thrive. But then we have to go beyond that. What are we doing to help millennials in the economy? So I'm grateful to be a national co-chair for the New Leaders Council, along with Senator Tim Kaine, who is slightly busy right now trying to become vice president. So when you think about the 44 chapters that we have, 4,000 alumni millennials across the country, and we're focusing on millennials in the economy, and what are we doing to increase opportunity as it relates to the skills gap and training and entrepreneurship. All of that is preparing our communities to get ready for what's coming. Too often, we want to presume that people are ready, but we're not connecting the jobs with the community, and we're not connecting training to the jobs. And we can't just have someone going to school and then graduating from school and then not having something available to them. We have to be able to inspire them, but then again, create the conditions for success. So I can have a great job, but I gotta have transportation to get there. I have to have a safe community that's there. I have to have a home where I feel comfortable in. There have to be schools that are good for my children. All of this is what's happening at the same time. And when you think about in these communities, where I live in the Bronx, which according to the census is the most diverse county in America, an 89.7% likelihood that 82 people at random will be of different ethnicity. It is of economic necessity and urgency that minority women-owned businesses are part of the process. And lastly, it's a recognition that someone who may not be a person of color has to understand and appreciate that we have to work together for our collective success. If I'm thinking about the growth, the survival, the resurgence of targeted communities, it can't just be Black and Latino and Asian and Native American doing it alone. It has to be Black, white, Latino, white, Asian, white, Native American, white. How do we build this all together around a strategy so that all are winning? It shouldn't be that just because you're growing the pie that someone's not able to eat. Everybody should be able to eat, and everybody should be able to do well. And when we recognize that growth, we can then develop even further. And that's why when we think about this, I often say, it's minority businesses, it's minority women-owned businesses. It's understanding that minority and women-owned business is different from small business. And what are we doing to empower all the parts so that everyone's able to thrive, not just a few. I tease this out and saying that my family is from Jamaica. I'm Jamaican descent, so we don't have one job, two jobs. We have three jobs, right? So in that way, we've opened our own company, Atlas Strategy Group, focusing on how to develop and grow minority women-owned businesses across the country. Been really focusing also on international campaigns as well, getting involved in that way. I mentioned New Leaders Council. I'm on the advisory board for the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, which is a legacy project for President Obama of what are we doing for these boys and young men of color around the 6 milestones. When you think of how in New York State we're the first state in the country for a $20 million commitment for a pilot program for education to help boys and young men of color to change the environment in our schools. That's game changing, that's transformational. When we think about what we're doing around with Juma Ventures, and how Juma Ventures was able to come into Yankee Stadium and hire these young people and give them opportunity, but then also talk to them about career readiness and financial literacy, etc. That's game changing, that's transformational. When we think about what we've been able to do in partnership with Eric Kohler and Ryan Adams and Operation Hope on focusing on financial literacy, being able to go in through our financial efforts in our schools to say to the young people and to the families, we want you to save your money, we want you to spend your money well, we want you to be effective in that way. That's game changing, it's transformational. When you think about, I come from my oldest brother's a vet, he's been in the military 29 years, how we now be able to get an app, that's another piece of legislation that we get done, so that veteran services can be in one central place in New York State, so that vets are not trying to go all over the place to figure out how they can get help. Game changing, transformational change. I reflect on something that Coach Amaker said here, that he looks for game-changing players and game-changing people. And I really believe that same kind of mindset, that I want people that when they think about my experience, that they'll one see someone from the Bronx and think, okay, the Bronx is pretty cool. I like that. You know, it's not just about the Yankees and hip hop and doo-wop and salsa, but it's about entrepreneurship. It's about minority-owned business, about education. It's about what we're doing to transform the game in our community. I want, and hopefully people will feel that the Institute of Politics is a place that they need to be a part of, that it can really impact their lives in a way that they think about politics differently. And we have a responsibility right now. That's the reason why I'm speaking with undergrad, grads, and the broader community, that it's very easy for the communities to get turned off and not be excited about what's happening here. But I want them to be excited about the impact of politics and movement. You know, for those that are interested, we have our study groups every Thursday from 4 to 5:30. You know, we're gonna have a great one the next few weeks. We have D Nice, the legendary hip hop DJ, on October 27th, also coming up to talk about how movement and music is intertwined. This is about really opening eyes for someone who may not think that politics impacts their life, and hopefully at the end they'll realize that politics impacts every part of their life. And so for me, I'm a skinny kid from the Bronx that was given a chance from the skinny guy from Hawaii and Illinois, right? And if my life experience at 33 years old can show someone what's possible when you recognize that you came from humble beginnings and people gave you a chance, and you're able to pursue your dreams, hopefully then we can live out the words of what Jim Wallace said in God's Politics, that we are the ones we've been waiting for. And that's the way I think about my initiatives. That's the reason I think about our collective legacy, and that's the reason why I'm here at Institute of Politics. I want to be able to help show the students now and show people across the country, you don't have to wait for someone else. You know, we've been waiting for you.